Welcome, everybody. We're going to start sharing our screen and get started here. Hopefully, everybody can see the screen and you are in the right place. This is the Housing Ready webinar from Housing North. All right, we're going to let people roll in before I officially get started, but welcome to our webinar. You can see our stars of the program are joining us as well. Hi, Josh, welcome.
Hello. It won't let me put my camera on.
Oh, I'll fix that. Give me 1 second here.
That's okay though.
Except being a co-host, and then you'll be able to show.
All right.
All right, I still see a few people rolling in, so we'll get started in just a minute. All right, I see most people have joined us, so I am going to get started here. I'm going to give just a brief introduction to the webinar. My name is Yarrow Brown, and I am the Executive Director of Housing North. And we have 4 panelists today, our 3 Housing Ready program directors, and then Josh Mills from the city of Frankfort, who will come on at the end to talk about pilots. I'm going to give just a brief overview of Housing North, some of the work we do and why we're here today, and then I'll turn it over to the Housing Ready staff. Hopefully my computer will work here. So for those of you who don't know about Housing North, we are a 10-county regional nonprofit, and our focus is on removing the barriers to housing in our 10-county region. We focus on 3 areas: communication awareness, policy and advocacy, and bringing capacity and resources to housing. We work across the income spectrum, and I just wanted to kind of set the stage for some of the terms we're going to be talking about today. This slide comes from Jim Tischler at the State Land Bank. And while Housing North works across the income spectrum, we really are focused on the areas where there are less resources and less funding available, between the 80 and to 120% of the area median income. I also just wanted to set the stage for the numbers. I think we all know that we are in a housing crisis in our community and statewide, and that most of, according to the statewide housing plan, 50% of our state's renters spend too much on housing. So bringing that down to Northwest Michigan, we know that many of our communities are ALICE, or asset limited, income constrained employed, which means that they really are spending too much on housing and transportation and are unable to save and are living basically paycheck to paycheck. And we really want to help reduce that cost burden and help them find housing that is more attainable and that is within their affordability range. Or we'll go into detail for each of the communities later on. I also just wanted to mention where we're coming from and where these numbers for our crisis come from, and that is our 2019, was done in 2019, projecting data from 2020 to 2025, showing the need for housing in our region, which was about 15,000 units. So we are making some progress towards that goal, and you can see the bulk of this need is in Grand Traverse County and is for rental units. So in Northwest Michigan, we know that about 39% of our households are considered ALICE, so this is for all 10 counties. And we also know that about almost 40% are spending more than 35% of their income on rent or housing. So we estimate there's about 4,400 units that have been built since the 2020 market study, and we are about 30% towards our goal, which is great, but still the majority of those homes are single family. And when we estimate that gap between what we would need to fund to fill the housing need to really make it attainable or affordable, it's a pretty high number. And I just throw this out there. It's about $445 million. So we're talking about a lot of need in our community. And that's why Housing North is here. I just want to highlight a few of our programs at Housing North. And each of these are live links. So after this webinar, you will get a copy of this presentation with the links and resources in here. But we do have quite a few programs. And none of these programs would really be possible without the support of our Housing Ready staff who are on the call today, and we'll talk about their programs. And I won't go into each of them in detail, but a lot of what we're doing is trying to bring these resources to our community in Northwest Michigan and help move the needle on housing. So that brings me to our Housing Ready program and Housing Ready communities. Since 2020, we've been trying to reach out to and collaborate with as many units of government in our region to encourage them to fill out the resources on the screen here, which are a communications toolkit and a Housing Ready checklist to see ways that they can become more housing ready and develop a strategy to possibly host or have a Housing Ready program coordinator or director. We are fortunate to have 3 of those in 3 of our 10 counties, and there are links to these resources as well as the new zoning reform toolkit on this slide. So we encourage you, if you don't know about these, to download them and let your community know that they are available. And so what do our Housing Ready staff do? Well, you're going to hear about it in just a second, but many of them on the call today, do this broad scope of basically being that resource and those boots on the ground for housing in our community. They help to coordinate local resources around housing, provide advocacy and education to the community, and really help identify potential opportunities and facilitate those collaborations between the public and private partnership. And so I'm going to start turning it over to some of our Housing Ready staff here. But before I do that, I just want to recognize that this program started in Charlevoix County, which we are hiring for right now. But Steve Schnell was our first Charlevoix County Housing Ready program coordinator, and we really wouldn't have been able to grow and launch this program without the Charlevoix County and the partners that are on this slide. I should mention that this is a shared capacity model where we get funding from both private foundations, but also the units of government to support these positions over 3 years. And I'm going to turn it now over to Andrea Jacobs. So she has been here for a year and works in Emmett County. And these are the partners that have helped to support her position, as well as the Little Traverse Bay Housing Partnership. So Andrea, I'm going to let you take it from here.
Thanks, Yarrow. I'm so excited to talk about the program. Like Yarrow said, I've been in place in Emmett County in this position for a year. I have lived in Emmett County for the majority of my life and worked in Emmett County for the majority of my life. My background is in social psychology, so I come at this with a little bit of a different bent. You'll always hear from me sort of stressing the stories and the verbiage that we're using and how we're presenting these ideas and sort of the emotional journey that we all have to go on in order to ready ourselves for this residential development and this community investment that we really haven't had to focus on, for a long time in our area. The statistics, like we have presented today, are also very important from a presentation standpoint. And when you're trying to convey the demand and the need, it's really important to be able to have some numbers that are inarguable. And something like 90% of our local demand is for rental units, but below $1,000 a month. How are we going to meet that? And hopefully what we can do is really just address this inventory issue as a sort of first priority, and being able to let the laws of economics kind of balance out the rest of it. We do need to make sure that we're holding space for some of our more vulnerable community members, but we also need to just look at the economics of what's happening here. And what we're up against in Emmett County is really that full, all of our rental units are full and on waiting lists. And so the people who are in homes that might not, meet their particular needs don't have anywhere to move, to maybe downsize in retirement or upgrade as far as square footage or yard size, maybe, if that's the part of life that they're in. We don't have any wiggle room here in Emmett County. And so, as a housing ready person on the ground, not only am I telling that story to our members of the public, but also the relationships that I build with the local units of government in helping them understand, our community plans, our land use plans, our zoning maps, and all of that, the work that they do to prepare those and be really intentional about how they lay those out can be some of our biggest challenges. That's one of my biggest hurdles, I would say, in Emmett County, looking at the infrastructure expansion and investment and development, which can really be a key issue when you're talking about higher density multifamily housing, which includes a lot of rental units as we know them. So when you sort of take a look at this chart, for example, and the limitations that we have here for our rent burden, and the fact that we don't have a significant, or haven't up here in Emmett County in the past 20 years, we haven't had a significant rental apartment neighborhood development. And who that is affecting, and when you talk about our median income here, this middle column, 35 to 49, $50,000 or so, that's kind of right in between that column and the next one is kind of our area median income. But if you looked at a scatter plot of our population, especially our year-round population, most of us are on the lower side of that. Most of our year-round population, most of our community members are in those red, orange, and yellow zones. And that's something that we have to be really, really mindful of in saying, this is not one particular type of person that we're meeting the needs for. It's all of us. And that you saw when we looked at the whole region with the 10 counties, if we're hovering at 40-50% of our people, of our community members are spending inordinate amounts of their income just on their housing, we need to create, a better balance there. And that's what all of us are working toward in each of our individual counties. In Emmett County, I was, really lucky to have the Little Traverse Bay Housing Partnership and some local government officials and community members that have been thinking about this and working on this and the advocacy and outreach component for a number of years now. But just like in every other community, even if you have the ability to pay attention to this, it's really on a volunteer basis. It's extra time that you're putting toward, or extra energy that you're putting toward on top of your regular full-time job, whether it's a government staff or a community member. And so putting a housing ready person in place, or really all I do, all of my energy is thinking about this and amplifying the work that can be done and is being done throughout my community. Some of our rural townships and villages would love to take some steps toward, residential development and accessing some grant funding or programs, and they just don't have the manpower, they don't have the capacity. That's the word, that's a huge part of what we do, is saying, I will help you. I have the energy and I have the time, and I will learn about this tool, and we can map this out together. And a good portion of our 10 counties are rural, and so they're up against that same restriction there. In talking about the infrastructure component, I know that we're all up against that same thing in Emmett County, particularly where we have water sewer is based on where we have our economies and our villages, which is clustered right around the Little Traverse Bay, which is also, where all of the real estate is the most expensive. So that, cost burden would be on developing with expensive real estate, which doesn't lead to very accessible numbers at the end as far as rental units or homes. But if we shift that and talk to our local units of government or community leaders and say, okay, we need to invest in this infrastructure expansion to get access to some of the real estate that's farther out, that in itself is impossibly expensive. So that just, sort of shifts that financial burden onto the local units of government, which is a difficult, I would say a difficult argument to present, but it's important for us as housing ready people. And I will say, I think the most important role that I have is helping our local units of government think of themselves as development partners. And that's not a comfortable maybe role that they have identified with up until now, but we all have sort of a part to play, and these communities, can really take a look at where they want to grow. And then when they're looking at their land use maps, I like to think of those, as our land use goals. And then we need to, as a government, as a community, map steps toward reaching those goals, which means that, and I don't want to oversimplify, but you'll always hear me say, it's not enough to just color it in on the map and say that's where we have multifamily, you know, multifamily housing. And then you look at it and then you look at your sewer map and you go, no, those two things don't line up. So there's a distance we need to cover, and what steps do we need to take moving forward? And, you know, that's some of the coolest parts of my job, is being able to talk to the community members and the local units of government and get to that space of what could it be and how do we plan to get there? And all of the
Andrea,
tools.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
pull a hook in here and pull in a
that's
question so we can hear a little bit about a project you're working on, and then move on to Zach. But no, this is really great. And I want to ask you, you know, so what project or projects are you excited about in your community right now that you're involved in?
Well, there's a couple of them that I'm super excited about. I'll give you two examples. One is a community planning project, which is with the Village of Pellston, which is exactly what we're talking about, in that, you know, there was sort of a corridor of residentially designated land within their village that was and underdeveloped. And we, you know, the village said, well, you know, we designated it and then we're just waiting now for it to be developed. We're ready. We want to be a community for residents and, you know, kind of a bedroom community for us, for our area. And so we got all of our community stakeholders together and are really trying to work on a community design plan that identifies and includes the schools and the conservancy lands and the, you know, thinking about crosswalks and our multifamily and our single family, and sort of really creating a space there that is something that we're invested in and we're moving meaningfully toward, which means that we can incentivize it, you know, if we realize how to prioritize some of our leverage. So that's a really cool one. And I have seen so much willing participation and enthusiasm from that community. How can we do this? What will it take? You know, and how excited they are to move forward with that. Another project that's a direct sort of result of taking that extra step from coloring it in on the land use map or the you know, zoning map, into really identifying what the language barriers or the restrictions would have been in our ordinance language in Emmett County. Our planner and our planning team went through and helped the planning commission and the county board approve residential parcels, basically duplexes and an accessory dwelling unit as a use by right. And so we have, as many communities probably do in our region, undeveloped subdivided plots and parcels. And a small developer was able to come in to this subdivided parcel that had 13 available lots, and by, you know, administrative approval, use by right, be able to build 39 small homes that will be available for long-term rental. And the key that makes that so important is that from the first conversation I had with that developer till when he broke ground in November, that first conversation was in May. And he had foundations in the ground in November and early December this year. And that, you know, time is money, right? And we know that the quicker we can make these things happen and move forward, the better chance of success we have. And so doing that homework in advance in Emmett County allowed for us to put, you know, 39 units, hopefully within the next year and a half, online for families and individuals. So those are two examples.
That's great. And I think Emmett is a little bit unique in our 10-county region. Is the county responsible for all the zoning in Emmett County, or do some of the townships do their own zoning? Can you maybe
Some of the townships do their own, and, you know, the municipalities tend to have their own, but the majority, I would say geographically, the majority of the county is guided by Emmett County zoning.
Okay.
And they have
so
been
that is
very,
a difference between most of our communities. Okay, well, before we move on to Zach, who's in Leelanau, is there anything else you want to touch on about your program in Emmett County?
No, I could talk about it for hours, as we all know, but I would be happy to answer questions at the end or specific issues if we come up.
Thank you. So Andrea has been on board for about a year, and then we were very grateful to be able to expand our Housing Ready program to both Leelanau and Manistee counties in September this year. So Zach Hillier, who's on the call here as well, he is our Leelanau County Housing Ready program director. Yes, they all have kind of different titles depending on the community, but they all pretty much do the same work. But these are the funders that support Zach's position. I just want to recognize them. And then I'm going to go to the next slide, Zach, and let you kind of introduce yourself and some of the data from Leelanau County.
Sure, thanks, Yarrow. Yeah, Zach Hillier. I started just late last year as the Housing Ready Program Director in Leelanau County. I'm originally from Northwest Ohio, Toledo, Ohio, Glass City. Go Mud Hens. That's our minor league baseball team. Also where the Jeep Wrangler is made. But what I wanted to do is start off by just sharing some data about Leelanau County that I think helps to quantify what we're already seeing on the ground and reinforce why communities have housing at the top of their agenda, pretty much all the time now. And the more we understand the data, the better we can use it to help craft solutions to address our housing needs. So to summarize, before jumping into the specifics, we have an affordability problem, a supply problem, and when it comes to, both affordable homes for rent and for purchase, so policies and programs that help create and preserve affordable homes, expand missing middle housing, and ensure the stability of renters and homeowners are key to addressing the issue. So first, you'll see in Leelanau County, 43% of our residents are either ALICE, asset limited, income constrained, and employed, or below the federal poverty level. So what this means is these families have to make trade-offs between basic necessities on an everyday basis. They have to choose between food, medication, transportation needs, and their housing. And we also see that 43% of families in Leelanau County are spending at least 30% of their income on rent. So this is putting them at cost burden or severely cost burden levels, which we'll get into later on. And when it comes to purchasing a home in Leelanau County, the prospects of doing so are becoming increasingly difficult, even for households making decent wages. Leelanau County has the highest home price to income ratio in our 10-county region because incomes just aren't keeping up with the prices. And you'll see the chart on the right ends in 2020. And as someone who purchased a home in 2021, I can't say the situation has gotten much better. And in fact, I was looking at median home values and comparing different 5-year American Community Service estimates. And I was looking at 2007 to 2011 versus 2012 to 2016. There was less than a 1% increase in median home value, but between 2012 and 2016, and 2017 and 2021, there was almost a 25% increase. So housing is expensive. When we look at rent burdens, again, we have 43% of our renters spending at least 30% of their income on gross rent, which is rent plus utilities. And 17% spending 50% or more. So when you break down rent burdens by income level, it creates an even starker picture. So the lower your income, the higher your rent burdens, and that creates less stability with housing. And for context, when I was looking at this is the American Community Survey 5-year estimate, 80% of renters included in these estimates made less than $75,000 as the household income. And just as housing costs for purchase are rising, so are rents. When looking at those same 5-year estimates, we saw a 12.2% increase between the 2011 2016 estimates, and almost a 17% increase in median rents between 2016 and 2021. One of the other kickers about this that I think I want to pay close attention to, and maybe just reinforces the supply issue that we're experiencing, is the percentage of renter occupied homes versus total occupied homes, it's getting smaller over time. So in the 5-year estimate that came out in 2011, it was 15%. 2012 to 2016, it was 14. And in the most recent 5-year estimate that came out for that ends in 2021, it was 10%. And this is on top of the fact that in Leelanau County, 41% of our housing stock is used for seasonal, recreational, occupational, such as seasonal homes and short-term rentals. So there's definitely a supply issue in conjunction with affordability. Next slide, please. And just what wage would someone need to afford the rent? Well, someone now has to make more than $20 an hour to afford a modest 2-bedroom apartment at HUD's fiscal year 2023 fair market rents for a single wage earner. Or they could work 80+ hours at the minimum wage. And the fair market rents that HUD is using are increasing. Last year, there were 933. So this both reflects HUD's attempt to keep up with the fair market rents and also just shows how fast rents are rising. So to me, this further illustrates why we need to continue pursuing affordable housing strategies with a sense of urgency, and because these trends are going to continue if we don't have meaningful policy interventions, from incentives, subsidies, and dedicated funding to help with development and close those funding gaps, and ways to preserve affordable homes and support the creation of affordable homeownership opportunities, and looking at our zoning ordinances to make sure we can reduce any barriers to the development of higher density, more affordable homes, missing middle again, and just to make sure that our renters and homeowners are supported and they have stable situations moving forward.
So thanks, Zach. I guess I want to ask, what is the biggest hurdle that you think you might be able to help overcome in Leelanau County in 2023? Or what is that issue that you're kind of taking on to tackle this year?
Well, one thing that keeps coming up, in addition to what Andrea laid out, a lot of the issues that I think are probably shared across the 10-county region, I think closing the funding gap, that comes up a lot. And I know that Housing North is, we're looking closely at ways that we can help, and there are various ways we can do it. So one of the things that I want to help with and support communities in making sure that we all know what possible ways that we can take advantage of to help close those funding gaps to make projects pencil out so we can, help to kind of expand the supply.
So I know you've only been on the job for four months or so, but I'm going to just ask, what are some of your most projects that you're most excited about that are happening in Leelanau County that you're a part of right now?
Well, I'm really excited about the rental preservation project that Housing North is working on. We have the matching grant that we achieved, and working with Peninsula Housing to preserve affordable rentals in Leelanau County. I'm excited about the new state bills and the new tools that communities can have from pilots and other ways to try to, again, lower the barriers to the development of more affordable homes. And I'm really excited about the work I'm kind of observing that was already in process, from Vineyard View Apartments with Homestretch, Community Land Trust. We now have a Community Land Trust, Peninsula Housing, closed on their first property, Habitat for Humanity with Maple City Crossings and the New Wave project on Bugай Road. So, and then just, multiple communities are looking at ways that they can help to reduce the barriers, developing more affordable homes. They're looking at housing ready checklists. They're looking at their zoning ordinances, making sure their master plans have those concrete goals to help continue, to try to address the issue.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we'll move on to Tracy, and we'll have time for questions at the end too. But, because a Housing Ready program this is a new program. It's not always clear like what you do as a housing ready program, staff person. What do you think is your most important role, in Leelanau County, having been there for a few months and kind of gotten the lay of the land? What role are you really filling in that community?
Well, an initial one, I think, is just to make sure that we all understand the options that are available to help address affordable housing needs. And then once a community says, okay, we think these could be, ways we could pursue, then I can provide support to help them kind of, go further into the process to potentially adopting them or revising zoning ordinances. So that's one of the things I've been focusing on, is try to be that level of support and just to kind of provide technical assistance.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were just talking yesterday in Leelanau about really where Zach is being pulled to, and this kind of goes to what Andrea was talking about, is to those areas that either already have infrastructure or are in that process of really becoming housing ready, because they're just in that space and they really are ready to move to the next step. And so Zach is able to come in there and really, help with that. So, we can't have you guys be everywhere and everything, but I really will say I've been impressed with how much you are engaged in the community and trying to really just have a pulse on what the Planning Commission is doing in each of your townships. So if there is a need, you can, be there to help support them. So thanks, Zach. I'm gonna turn it over to Tracy now. So now we're moving south to Manistee County. Tracy also started in September with Zach, and these are the funders that support her program. So Tracy, I'll let you take it away.
So hi, I'm the housing coordinator for Manistee County, and I grew up in Manistee County, and like many people, went to college, moved away, had been gone for quite some time. So I'm excited that I'm able to live and work now and return to my roots where I grew up, and bring my children, my daughters here, to have a chance to enjoy some of Northern Michigan and the things that Manistee County has to offer. My background is nonprofit management, but I also have degrees in business and marketing, so they kind of offset each other. And in Manistee, we have 21 units of government that I work with. And as Andrea had kind of talked about, within those units of government, one of the challenges that we see is there are 3, possibly 4 areas that have water and sewage. So that becomes one of those hurdles that we encounter in this area, just like our other partnering 10 counties. But so I work in Manistee County with a housing action team, and it's made, or we like to call it the HAT. It's made up of community stakeholders that are interested in housing, agencies that really are housing focused, as well as governmental units and leadership. And that group really sets the priorities and direction of our community in terms of housing. And like other staff that you've heard today, some of the things that I work on are, we have a housing checklist, which talks about ordinances and zoning and how those things can be reformed in order to encourage and remove obstacles for housing. I spend time, really listening to our community members and the needs that they have. And then there's that opportunity to match developers with some of the opportunities for the county. And then some of the other things that the other staff have touched on are really working with units of government and building awareness and consensus about housing. So everybody in our community thinks and believes there's rightly so a crisis for housing, but some people have different terminologies that they use. So kind of making sure that everybody is on that same page with what those terms are, and that we can have a consensus on how to move forward are some of the things. And some of the similar other things that, you know, you've heard today. Here's the data for Manistee County. And again, you're going to see that, you know, in our county, just like the others, there is an affordable rent issue. There's that gap between what a housing wage would be, which is $916, and what in Manistee County, people earning minimum wage, what in realistically what they can afford, which is $525. And then you know, that's across the board. What we're seeing is that those gaps are continuing, even though the minimum wage has increased. So if you go to the next slide, you know, you heard us talk also about ALICE being asset limited, income constrained employed individuals. And Manistee County is at 42% of working individuals having, you know, that burden of housing. And if you look, we're at 50%. You saw anywhere from 40, close to 40 to 50% across the board. Manistee County has 50% of individuals being at least 30% of their income spent on housing. And, you know, that's where we end up in this community, similar to other communities. But some of the things that are unique to our community, and the things that I've been working on based on some of the leadership in the community and that housing action team, are that blight in our community is a huge thing that we're looking to alleviate. So I work, Manistee was designated actually by the state as a distressed community. And I work with the land bank on looking at opportunities that there are for housing, whether we demolish something or repair and then are able to either sell it or look at different opportunities that might exist as a result of renovating or demolishing a structure. I work with the Housing Beautification Commission for the city, as well as the city, on restoration and home repairs through a My Hope grant. But one of the tools that has been a focus of our community has been an NEZ. So in 2019 is really the beginnings of when it was decided and agreed upon that we wanted to move forward with an NEZ. So an NEZ refers to a neighborhood enterprise zone. And it really is a tool to for residential housing to spur development and rehab for residential housing. So that's really the crux of why you would want to have something like this. It's really for communities that haven't or wouldn't otherwise have an opportunity to take advantage of, or really be able to move the needle forward in rehab and new development. So one of the things that happens is when on those either new structures that are developed or the improvements that homeowners have, is that it then has a tax incentive for the homeowners. So it really ends up being a win for homeowners because their taxes can be reduced while improving their properties or developing things on their properties. It is a win for the city because in the county, because we're able to take care of some blight and help homeowners with repairs, as well as encouraging new structures to be developed that aren't what normally would be conventional things, like Somebody may have an ADU that they put on their within the enterprise zone, or a tiny home, or there could be a vacant lot that was in that zone that now has an opportunity for housing. So the tool can be used for a number of things. And here's kind of a high level overview of some of the larger things that you need to think about if you're interested in an NEZ. It is a very time consuming, sort of detailed process, but a local unit of government determines an enterprise zone. You can have more than one within that unit of government. And the NEZ must have at least 10 plotted parcels, and it has to be compact and contiguous. There is, and that's for residential housing. So there is a caveat if you're interested in doing sort of a downtown revitalization district. The restrictions are a little bit different. It is the 10, takes away the 10 plotted parcels, but you do have to have 10 or more facilities in that downtown district to qualify. One of the other things that is really like the bar is you do need to have not exceeding 15% of your total NEZ of the residential housing. So, and again, if you're doing the neighborhood downtown district, it's a little bit a different percentage. I think it's 10%, but for residential, you can't have more than 15% of your county's residents be within that zone. So everything can't be included. You just have to designate an area that really you want to focus on. So there is a link to NEZs that is provided there. And then I do have on the next slide, it's a little overwhelming. So I'm not going to go through that step by step, but the link will take you to lots of guides and frequently asked questions. And there are quite a few steps that you need to move through. So I was able to kind of put those steps in this flowchart process that you'll be able to receive after the webinar that kind of works the way through how you could establish and what you need to do in order to check off all those things on the list within the act to accomplish an NEZ. So that really is, you know, one of the things that I'm really excited about in my community is having an opportunity, as I had mentioned, you know, having grown up here and seeing where things evolved. I'm really excited about the NEZ and having an opportunity to be a part of this and move this forward. So it's been sitting since 2019. And, you know, we're as housing ready staff able to, as Andrea and Zach talked about, provide capacity for the counties that we're in and move projects forward that people really haven't had the ability to do. They know they want to do it, but they haven't been able to do that. So being a part of that in an area that I grew up is very exciting for me. And I'm thrilled to be able to be here to do that.
Thanks, Tracy. And we should point out that, you know, before you started, Manistee did have a housing action plan, which is a really important tool. And that is something that Housing, you know, North can help with in communities, but that tool was already there for you. So in a way, you kind of had a guide, and maybe you could just explain a little bit about that plan and how it's helped or maybe not helped in your position.
Sure, yeah. So there was an initiative because we in Manistee had determined that housing was a priority. And there was what's called Rising Tide was an initiative that they received a grant for. So it really went and analyzed where we were, took into account history and characteristics of our community, and a plan was developed from there about what needed to happen and what stakeholders wanted to see happen around housing. So that was a project that occurred. It set sort of the plan in motion, but then that independent contractor, the work that they did, the plan, was as far as that goes. So it was up to the local county to move forward on that. And that's where I've been able to make some inroads in being able to help pieces of that plan move forward.
Thank you. And we do have an example of that plan, on our website, and then we are writing a similar one for the village of Kalkaska. So, those are tools for communities. And I think for Tracy, that really helped focus her main role, which was to work on NEZs. So that brings us to the next exciting part of our program. One second here, where we're going to just highlight and talk a little bit about these tools. And so Tracy, I guess I wanted to just ask you one question before we move on to this, because the Housing Michigan Coalition, and we had some really exciting news in December where the governor did sign 4 bills that are bringing more tools to our region. So we're talking about 2 of them today, and one of them is NEZs. So what do you think the expansion of this tool? So there was a comment in the chat, I think a question about whether or not this could be for townships, and I would say yes, because now this tool is available to all units of government. So maybe you could just touch on why you think that is important that happened.
Yeah. So it is an exciting thing that other communities will be able to take advantage of. So as I had mentioned prior to this, there was a stipulation that you had to be designated by the state to be in a distressed community in order to access and utilize the NEZ tools. So that with this new bill, that caveat has been removed, and it opens it up for anyone that's interested, as long as you go through the process and steps. You still have to have the approval of the local units of government and follow those steps. But you're able then to access this tool to either spur new development. Again, that's not in the most conventional ways, and also help with renovation in your community and provide, those tax incentives for local residents. So it's an exciting tool that I think it will be able to be broadly used within communities and villages and townships.
Thanks, Tracy. So these are the 4 bills that passed, and there is a link on our website, and I believe they are linked in this PowerPoint somewhere that were passed. And so 2 of them we're talking about today. We won't go over the other 2 in detail today, but look for a webinar in February, as well as one probably in March, both statewide and then in Northwest Michigan. But this is a really exciting new tool, and that's why we have Josh Mills, who is the superintendent of Frankfurt. And he's on the line here. And so Josh, I'm going to just turn it over to you for a few minutes. I have some questions, but I want to hear from you why, and you were a huge part, I think, of the history and why this pilot bill was even brought to our attention. So can you just talk about why the passing of this bill is so important to you?
Well, this legislation, the whole package of legislation is really monumental and critical to our continual success. So it's been really exciting, entering in this new calendar year where we have these tools available to us. And as you stated, we've been working very long, hard, and diligent on this. So it's been very exciting to have this come through. It's the pilot is really an excellent tool for communities because it allows us to do a better job partnering with the private sector. I think, wholeheartedly, we really look to the private sector to deliver this housing, and understanding the costs associated with real estate, the interest rates and the tax structures that we have up here, especially with non-homestead structures, those types of structures that are rented and, they're not owned. They're owned, but they're not able to be qualified as homestead exempt. So, this legislation is just essential for us to just do a better job partnering with the private sector. We have numerous businesses here in Frankfurt that have actually bought their own housing to provide places to stay for their workforce, and they're struggling. By the time they paid for the property and did a little bit of upkeep to the structure and cover the taxes, the insurances, they're essentially subsidizing the rent for their workforce. But it's critical for them to have the staff that they need to stay open and provide the service that we all expect and enjoy in our communities. So for us, we're going to be working diligently. I've read the legislation 3 or 4 different times just to make sure we're covering all the bases with it. And recently, we were awarded through a partnership with Homestretch which is a nonprofit developer. The city provided property to Homestretch to construct 12 workforce housing units. And we were successful with the first round of missing middle funding through MISHDA. So going into that, our city council approved a 0% PILT on that. And we have 2 other PILT developments that are provided by MISHDA as well. So those situations are really ideal for communities to look at, because you want to look at this in a big picture kind of way, because these are going to involve tax abatements to the private sector. It's a great tool for us to be able to deliver that, but also communities got to look at the big picture. The more tax abatements that we provide, the less likely we're going to have revenue down the road. So our community is really looking at existing tax exempt property that's owned by the city, property that's owned by the school district, these types of parcels that we can put back into the development realm. And since we're not getting any tax revenue on it, it allows us to be very creative with the PILT. In essence, with the project with Homestretch, it allowed us to go to a 0% PILT, which is 0 taxes being paid for on that property. So, with 12 units, we're looking at just under $1,000, including utilities, to be able to be offered to a small family or 2 people renting a 2-bedroom unit. So it's exciting for us. And obviously, this will fall within the 60% to 120% AMI. We'll be utilizing the missed and middle spreadsheets that MISHDA provides to use that as a gauge to where the rent will need to be to qualify for a PILT. Again, we'll be looking strongly at an infill development for this, in addition to surplus property that the city of Frankfort can come up with, or the school district in our situation here, or any other tax exempt entity that may own property. So we're excited about this. We do need to create an ordinance. We need to establish the criteria, what will allow us to move forward with a request, and what will justify, where we land with the percentage associated with the PILT. Again, I go back to existing tax exempt property as being, ideal for our community and ideal for, meeting the needs of our workforce housing, the opportunities that'll be available to us. But, it was exciting. We put a lot of effort into this legislation, expanding the NEZ is going to be critical for our communities, the residential exemption opportunities, so these 4 bills are really going to, create a wide array of opportunities and tools, and it's exciting. Working with our city council right now, we'll be moving forward with the establishment of the criteria and the adoption of an ordinance. We're hoping that we can have conversations with our existing private sector that provided the housing and see where we can fall in that. But we really look to infill development to be critical as we move forward. And expanding off of this, our community is going to go through, we've retained Wade Trim, which is a zoning consultant. Many of you have probably heard of the firm. They're statewide. They're going to help us walk through a workforce housing overlay that could possibly, say we have a minimum lot, 50 by 150, 7,500 square. We may be in a position, if everything goes through based on our hopes, that we could have up to 5 units on that parcel, maybe a quadplex and an ADU. We already allow ADUs in all of our residential zones, so the PILT's going to probably play a big role in existing ADUs because they're not fully tax homestead exempt if the primary homeowner is living in the primary principal residence. So it's an amazing tool for our communities. It's going to create a lot of opportunity. And again, I reflect back that it's essential that our private sector play a major role in this, and this is going to allow them to help us deliver the needs of our community.
So Josh, that's really awesome, and thank you for leading this. I guess I have two questions for you, and then we'll turn it over, to the attendees to see if they have any questions. But what would you say to a township or a unit of government that hasn't negotiated a PILT, before, and why would you really encourage them to consider using this new tool?
Well, before this legislation, you could only do it with MISTA projects. Or the projects that are similar to MISTA where the funding is coming through the federal government to the state government. So unless there was a MISTA development that was going to occur, and that rarely occurs in townships unless they have the infrastructure and the score criteria and everything that goes along with that. So this is going to be huge for townships because they typically would not have been able to take advantage of that before because they just don't have the infrastructure, the resources to be able to do it. So this is going to be a very intriguing opportunity for township government in rural communities.
Yeah, and then I guess the other thing, I would ask is how, so a township that does not have a housing ready staff person, let's just say, where do you begin, and what is one of your biggest resources that you use, like when you first started to develop your pilot ordinance in Frankfurt?
We've adopted a pilot ordinance before for the 3 previous projects. Moving forward, it's gonna look a little different because of the opportunities laid out in this new legislation. But, as a board member of Housing North, I'm hoping that we can create some support to provide to communities that maybe could serve as a template. And I think communities like Frankfurt that are going to move forward rather quickly, and I got to believe Traverse City, there are other cities in our communities are going to move forward rather quickly. So they're going to lay the foundation. I'm real hopeful that the attorneys that are helping provide the guidance on this are collaborating, and we use that as a resource and a tool and a model and an outline moving forward for these other communities that may not be in a position to do that.
Yeah, and I'll just point to some of the links on the slide here. So this slide, deck will be emailed out to anybody who signed up. So there are links to example ordinances. Keep in mind they're from before this new legislation passed. But I do think through Housing North, we can certainly help look to your other communities that have negotiated a pilot. And then MML and CEDAM and some other statewide partners will be following up with another webinar later this year or this month, next month in the March, to just follow up on some of this and dive in deeper. So we are here as a resource. Our Housing Ready staff are a resource for this, and we'll guide their communities. So I'm just going to go to the next slide quick to kind of show what we're going to do for the next steps, which I pretty much outlined. But we did send a letter to all units of government introducing the bills, an email letter with links to the bills. And so that went out yet on Tuesday, and we'll send that to any partners as well. And then in February, as I said, we're going to have a webinar. We hope to update our Housing Ready checklist with some details about these new tools, and then really just start getting to work with our units of government. So that is all I really have. These are the contact information for our staff and contractors we work with, and want to just give those attending a chance to answer any or put any questions in the chat. And then Housing Ready staff, if you have anything else, you just want to add before we close, this is the time. I think I've asked everything I wanted to pull out, but I also just want to thank Josh, who's a board member, and for really helping to keep the momentum going on these bills, because your energy has just really helped, I think, get them across the finish line and let people know how important they are in the community.
I would like to just highlight something that Josh said. He kind of breezed over, but I think is a super important step for communities that are considering things like tax incentives or any sort of incentivized development, is to have a list of priorities or a list of scoring criteria that the community and the local officials have worked together to create sort of a list of, if this is where you build it, or this is what you're going to build, this is the degree to which we're going to participate. And that step is so crucial. I think for Josh to be able to have already done that in his community and then be able to readily move forward and use these tools is a significant point to try to highlight there.
No, that's awesome. Thanks, Andrea. I think that really kind of brings it back to why we're providing, technical support staff to help. Josh, were you going to say anything?
Well, going to the NEZ, and maybe Tracy could even add on this, before you had to be a core community to take advantage of the NEZ. Now, I believe it's offered to everybody with this legislation, whether it's township government, city government, village government, county government. And Tracy's yes, so she's been studying that legislation quite well. So that's huge for as well, for our rural areas and our township areas.
Yeah, and I think then the next thing is just getting people comfortable with these tools, and how they're, to not be afraid of them and to be just at least try to investigate if it's going to work. There's other tools that are outside of these bills too, like the brownfield TIF, having a land bank, really developing those relationships. And so, know that we're here to help answer those questions. Why would you do a brownfield TIF versus a pilot now? Because they can't really be done at the same time. So these are things we'll dive into, as well as the other two acts or two bills, and how communities and examples of how other communities might be embracing those tools. So we'll be in touch. I'll give the audience maybe one more chance to put any questions in the Q&A or the chat, but we did answer the two, I think, that were on there, that yes, we believe NEZs can be now allowed in townships. Now, how you're going to do that with some of the township, some of the details around it, that's something we can dive into. But I do think this is a huge win, especially for our rural communities, that these tools, really did not exist before. So there doesn't seem to be any other questions in the chat. So I will just thank you all. This is being recorded, so we will send it out to everybody who participated and signed up. And then please reach out to us and use the links and resources and let us know if you have any questions. So thanks, Housing Ready staff and Josh.
Yeah, thank you, Yarrow and staff.
I'm going to stop recording if I can figure out how. Stop.